The last things he said to me is, please, sir, save Chicago. We're going to do that. We're going to save Chicago from horrible crime.
Before sunrise, Chicago wasn't silent. It was holding its breath. At exactly 5:30 a.m., the stillness shattered. Engines roared through the fog as convoys of ICE tactical teams moved in tight formation, headlights slicing through the gray streets of Little Village, Cicero, and Joliet. Federal agents, armored and focused, stormed through aging homes and warehouses. Doors exploded inward. The crack of flashbangs echoed between narrow alleys. Families stood frozen, faces lit by the red-blue strobe of police lights. It was the start of Operation Midway Blitz, a massive raid ordered by Homeland Security after weeks of shootings, overdoses, and cartel-linked murders spreading across the Midwest. This wasn't another immigration patrol. It was a battlefield maneuver disguised as law enforcement. By dawn, 550 suspects were in custody, men and women from Mexico, Honduras, and Guatemala. Some had criminal records, others were just ghosts in the system. Agents believed they'd finished their sweep. But then came the shock. Inside dozens of homes, they uncovered hidden vaults and sealed basements packed with boxes. Inside, 180 pounds of methamphetamine, 62 kilos of cocaine, and hundreds of handguns and rifles, all wrapped in coated packaging traced to Mexican origins. Suddenly, the operation changed shape. What began as an immigration sweep had become a war against a shadow army. At the command post near Midway Airport, analysts decrypted live messages, Spanish chatter about shipments, money counters hidden behind fake walls, and an encrypted feed showing cartel symbols. The connection was unmistakable. A Mexican cartel, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, had quietly infiltrated the Midwest. Illegal migration wasn't the smokescreen, it was the strategy. Each crossing masked couriers, each home hid a node in a vast logistics chain. By 9 a.m., 5 red markers flashed on the DHS map: warehouses, garages, and a rail yard near Bridgeview. The order from Washington was simple: simultaneous strikes. The agents didn't cheer. They just tightened their vests and prepared for war. The Dawn raid had exposed a monster sleeping inside America's heartland, and Chicago was about to learn how deep the infection ran. You can support us by liking, subscribing, and telling us which country you are watching from. The green light went solid, and the city seemed to inhale. 5 teams rolled at once, engines low, radios clipped to a whisper. In Bridgeview, the warehouse squatted behind a chain-link fence crowned with tired razor wire, the kind people stopped seeing after years of passing by. Tonight it wasn't invisible. A battering ram kissed the steel door, and the night answered with thunder. Flash, boom! The world turned white for a blink, then shapes, shouts, the hard sprint of boots over concrete. Inside was heat and chemistry. Rows of blue barrels bled a sweet, metallic odor. A catwalk cut the room in half. Figures moved up there, shadows at first, then muzzle sparks stitching the air. The first volley cracked the rafters and sent dust drifting like gray snow. Agents hugged pillars and returned fire in short, staccato bursts, not to win the room but to own it, one measured step at a time. A drone's infrared feed washed the monitors at the command post in ghostly reds, every heartbeat alight. On the floor, a young agent named DeSoto dragged a wounded teammate behind a forklift, breath ragged, jaw clenched hard enough to creak. A medic slid in on one knee, hands steady, voice calm, the way people sound when they've seen worse and lived anyway. Above them, a gunman ran for a stairwell, slipped in a sheen of chemical spill, and vanished beneath a falling crate. The room quieted the way storms quiet, like they're still there, just further away. Then the wall opened, not from explosives, but from a hidden panel behind stacked pallets. Out stepped a man in a cheap jacket with expensive eyes, hands up, mouth set in a line that had practiced surrender. On the table near him, a ledger lay open beside 3 phones and a key fob with a tiny scorpion charm. The ledger was neat in a way that felt cruel. Numbers, arrows, initials, a clean river of money that never touched daylight. 2 tons projected for the quarter. 150 firearms logged as parts, never as guns. In a side office, agents found a cot, a Bible, and a shoebox of photographs. Birthdays, a baby with cake on his face, a grandmother under a plastic-wrapped couch. The courier who slept here wasn't a villain from television. He was a hinge between desperation and profit, a body the network could replace without slowing. By the time sun licked the warehouse windows, Bridgeview was secure. Not triumphant, quiet. Outside, sirens dopplered toward other streets, other doors. The Scorpion key fob sat bagged on an evidence table. And somewhere in the city, another phone buzzed unanswered. The network had felt the knife, but not the hand. The war was now fully awake. By midday, Chicago was breathing through the smoke of its own secrets. The raids had ended, but the city hadn't settled. News choppers hovered above rooftops, their lenses zooming into shattered windows, bullet holes and evidence bags glinting under streetlight haze. Every screen in America carried the same headline: ICE raid exposes illegal migrant network in Chicago. 2 tons of drugs, 150 guns seized. But beneath the triumph, something more human began to surface. In Little Village, families stood on porches, staring at what was left behind. Doors ripped from hinges, lights still flickering inside rooms that smelled of tear gas. Some wept for the ones taken, others whispered prayers for the ones left behind. A teenage boy clutched his mother's arm, watching the news replay his street from above. He didn't understand the politics. He only knew that the house next door was empty now, and the man who used to bring him candy was suddenly a villain on TV. Downtown, ICE and Homeland Security held a press conference. The spokesperson's tone was calm, precise, proud. 2 tons of narcotics, 150 illegal firearms, dozens of fake passports and millions in cash. Operation Midway Blitz, they said, was a definitive blow to organized crime hiding behind illegal migration. But when the questions began, the room turned colder. Reporters pressed for answers. How many detainees had criminal records? How many were innocent? Outside, protest signs began to rise. Families, not felons. We are not your enemies. Crowds gathered near the federal building, voices trembling but fierce. Across Chicago, church doors opened for the frightened, undocumented workers, mothers, and children unsure whether their fathers would ever return. Immigration lawyers worked through the night, tracing names, checking detainment lists that changed by the hour. Yet for every accusation, another truth pushed back. Agents released body cam footage from Bridgeview, men firing from catwalks, barrels marked Producto de Mexico, maps linking Chicago to cartel hubs in Guadalajara and Monterrey. The footage drew gasps. The debate deepened. Was this justice, or was it vengeance wearing a badge? In the command center near Midway, the mood was quieter. No applause, no celebration, just paperwork and exhaustion. Agents watched the news from silent screens, knowing they'd walked a moral tightrope. Every face they arrested had a story. Some stories hid monsters, others hid fear. And as the sun sank behind the skyline, Commander Ruiz whispered to his team, not to the cameras, not to the crowd, but to the weary agents in that flickering room, that every victory in this war comes with a cost no one can count. The city had been saved, but its soul was now on trial. By the time dusk folded over Chicago, the echo of gunfire had faded, replaced by a quieter war, the war of perception. On the news, politicians argued over justice and overreach. In the neighborhoods, silence lingered like fog. The city was caught between pride and pain, between the relief of safety and the weight of collateral damage. Inside the ICE command center near Midway Airport, the air buzzed with the hum of servers and the low murmur of agents reviewing data. Rows of confiscated phones blinked like dying stars on a table. Every vibration carried a potential lead, a name, a payment, a location still waiting to burn red on a digital map. One laptop cracked open a network of offshore accounts stretching from Texas to Panama. Another revealed photos of freight trucks, each marked with invisible Scorpion decals. The cartel hadn't died. It had just bled and vanished into the shadows. For the agents, exhaustion wasn't an emotion anymore. It was a way of life. They had walked through smoke and shrapnel, through fear and fury, only to find that victory didn't look like they imagined. It looked like a half-empty coffee cup, a news ticker that wouldn't stop, and a nation that couldn't decide if it was grateful or ashamed. Days later, federal reports confirmed the staggering scope of the seizure. 2 tons of narcotics, 150 firearms, $12 million in cash. But buried beneath the statistics were smaller victories. A young officer who pulled 3 children from a burning flat, a medic who kept a wounded agent breathing with nothing but gauze and grit, a mother reunited with her son after being cleared of charges. Meanwhile, the streets changed in subtle ways. Warehouses once buzzing at night now sat hollow and locked. Emergency rooms saw fewer overdoses. Schoolyards were louder again. But in places like Cicero and Little Village, the air still trembled with unease. For some, Operation Midway Blitz was salvation. For others, it was a scar carved by strangers who never knocked. At the federal hearing in Washington, officials called the operation a model of interagency precision. They said it proved that the nation's heartland was no longer a safe harbor for organized crime. But even the men who led it knew the truth was heavier. Because behind every arrest number was a face. Behind every gun seized was a story that ended too soon or too hard. As the final reports were sealed and the cameras turned away, the agents packed their gear. Some would return home to families who barely recognized them. Others would deploy again before the week's end. The war wasn't over. It had only shifted its ground. And somewhere beyond the skyline, under the hum of the city's streetlights, someone new was already watching, already learning, already planning. Because this battle, between law and chaos, between justice and consequence, never truly ends. When Chicago finally slept, the fog returned, the same fog that had hidden the convoys days before. But now in the stillness, one truth remained unbroken. America had struck back, and for one fragile night, the city was safe enough to dream again.